It is 7 p.m. on a Monday, which means it's time for Model Monday. Today, this is our project in preparation for the future class that will happen in the electronics area, or for the electronics lab, where they make a stop and go light. We will be making the physical things to house the LEDs to go in the stop and go light. Let's just ignore the fact that I have 1 red and 2 green lights and no yellow. Let's just pretend that that's not a thing right now. I don't know why that's a thing, but that's the way it turned out in my render just now. We're going to move on. We'll fix it in post. Alright, so for those of you following along, let's go ahead and start a new project. The main thing that we will be making here is a tiny little LED. It's so cute little. Look how cute little it is. Neat. This is a 5mm LED. Yeah. So we'll just kind of jump in and get started. We will start by creating a new component. So each one of these LEDs, we're going to make its own component. So in the create menu, I'm going to go to new component right away, and I'm going to create a new component, and I'm going to name that new component, let's call it red LED. Green or yellow would also be a sufficient name to name your new component. I guess you could have 2 green and 1 red. Because yellow is just a green light anyway, right? Let's be real. You don't need yellow. That's just a different kind of green. Alright, so, okay. So now that we've got our new component, now we can create a sketch in that component. You'll notice that when I create a new component here and I create a sketch inside of that, I want to make sure that when I create a new component, this little radio button here is active. Here, I should be using my magical pointer device. So technically right now in this document, we have 2 components. We've got our main document component, which is called unsaved. So we've got this unsaved component. And then we've got a component that we just made, our red LED component. And the little radio button here shows what the active component is. So whatever is the active component, that will be the area where new sketches are made, where new bodies are made. When we get to that part. So I'm going to make sure, and it automatically does that when you create a new component. It automatically makes it the active component, but it's just a good thing to note. Alright, so we'll go up to create, and we'll say create a sketch. I am actually going to draw this sketch on my top surface. So it's the axis in between my green and my red axis here, or the plane in between my green and my red axis. If I just click on the word top over in the navigation cube in the top right hand corner, then I won't accidentally choose a different plane. And we can start by drawing our LED. So I'm going to begin by drawing a line. A line that I don't remember the size of. I have 8.6 millimeters. All right. Hey, you know, here's a thing. These LEDs, they use them all around the world. And what does that usually mean? Is that these dimensions will be in the metric system. Dun dun dun. So if we wanted to, we could certainly change our document units, and I'm going to do that. It'll save me typing a bunch of M's in my actual measurements here. So if I change, spin down my little document settings window, change my active units, I'll change them to millimeters. This is highly unusual for this class because we draw in freedom units normally in this class, but in this case, they're all going to be metric measurements.
Wouldn't you be able to download just an LED?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Okay.
But this is the beginner class where we learn to draw stuff. and we don't just go to McMaster-Carr and download a stop and go light. That's not what this class is. All right. So I'm going to click on the create and come down to the line option here. I'm going to draw my line from my origin, and I'm going to draw it straight up. And it's going to go up 8.6 millimeters. So it's a tiny little line. This is going to be the center line for our part. So I'm going to kind of zoom in so it gets a little larger here. The top of our LED, I'm drawing this upside down just for reference. So I'm going to draw my LED upside down like this. So the top of our LED is the bottom of our LED down here is basically a circle. So it's a sphere. It's a half sphere. I'm going to choose to make it with a 2-point circle. So a 2-point circle is handy if you have like an end point that you want to reference as kind of the tip of the sphere. Not the tip of the spear, the tip of the sphere. And this sphere is going to be 5 millimeters. See, I was going to say I didn't have to type in the ends. It's the whole reason of changing my document settings. And I'm going to type in the 5 millimeters. And now I'm not going to hit enter. What I really want to do is I want to click on, I need to specify the second point in this 2-point sphere. And I want to make sure I specify that second point on that line. Now this is kind of an interesting thing. You see how this sphere is, or sorry, this circle is blue? It thinks it's not a fully constrained sketch, but if I try to move it around, at least that's what I tried to do before, oh, still says it's not. It won't let me move it. Oh, and now it just turned black. So I just noticed this while I was making the sketch in preparation for the class. Let me do it again just to see if it is going to do it. You know, a blue sketch is normally a sketch that represents something that is not fully constrained, right? So in theory, this blue sketch is not fully constrained, but it definitely is, because I can't click and move it anywhere. And it seems like, oh, I can click and move it. Look at that. I must have not clicked right on the second time. So I'll click that first one, 5 millimeters, and I'll click on the line the second time. And now it seems that if I, weird. I was able to do it the first time. 5. And now on the line, right? Yeah, it seems that it's not connecting. It's not connecting that endpoint. So if your sketch is doing what my sketch is doing, we want to fully constrain this sketch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a constraint. We have a center point, and if I just say, hey, I want to add a coincident constraint. So I'll come down to constraints and then choose coincident. And then I'll just pick the center of my circle and that line. And now it is fully constrained, which makes our friends at Autodesk smile. All right. So now let's go ahead and make kind of the base of our LED. So if I click on the Create menu, come down to the Line tool, at what is the top of our line here, if we just click and place the first point of another line.
Hang on, Carl.
Oh yeah.
My circle will not coincide.
Uh-oh. It says, no, it will not be coincident. I refuse. You cannot make me.
Okay, I'm gonna put him anywhere I want. I have this point here. So I go to constraint, coincident.
So I think you've got the wrong point selected already. So like hit the escape key and just kind of click off into no man's land over here. And now
Okay.
choose your coincident constraint. And then there you go, that point, and then that one. There we
Alright.
go. Cool. Yeah, I think because you already had a point selected when you went to make it coincident. All right, so now we're drawing a little line at the top of our LED. This is kind of representing the bottom of our LED here, even though we're drawing it upside down, because I like to be confusing. It's going to be a 3 millimeter long line. And then from the end point of that line, we are going to draw down 1 millimeter. Just clean up a couple of my measurements here. Maybe I'll drag that off to the side there. Bring that a little closer. Now, we can draw kind of the side of our LED. So, what's going to happen with the side of our LED is we're going to want to draw a line that is straight up and down, and that is tangent to our circle. So, there's yeah.
Isn't the LED 2.5 in diameter with a little bit of a lip thingy on it?
Yeah, so the little lip is kind of what we're getting to right now. Well, and this is 5 millimeters in diameter. It's 2.5 in radius.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but there is a little tiny lip at the bottom. And it's a 1 millimeter lip, in fact. So the way that I chose to draw this is I'm going to draw a line straight down that is tangent to my circle that connects to that bottom line right there. So I did mine the fancy way, where I hold down a magical button on my keyboard. So if before I made my line, if I hold down the shift key before I click to place the first point of my line on that circle, now it kind of is forcing it to be tangent. I'm continuing to hold the shift key down as I move my mouse around, and you can see the line is always going to be tangent. It's kind of adding that tangent constraint right away. And if I move my mouse down until I get a second little constraint that's popping up right there, the little blue square is my perpendicular constraint. So what it's telling me is this line here is going to be tangent to our circle, and it's going to be perpendicular to the bottom of our little LED down there. And then I can, click and place that line. Now, another way to do that, if you like extra work, is we could just draw a line poorly, and just make it come down here somewhere, right? And now I can add those constraints after the fact. So I can come up and grab my tangent constraint, and I could come up and grab my perpendicular constraint, and I can add those after the fact. Either way is totally sufficient and acceptable. And then the last thing we have to do here, Mike, to your point, is just to close off our bottom lip. So I just drew a little line that closes off our bottom lip of our LED there. Let's go ahead and revolve this, because we've got, we still have to draw the anode and our cathode, but we can go ahead and revolve this right now. So I'm going to go ahead and say finish sketch. And I am going to name my sketch. The name of this is my LED profile. Alright, so if we come up to the Create menu and we find our Revolve option, the things that we're going to revolve are going to be all three of those objects there. And the axis that we're going to revolve around is that 8.6 millimeter line that we drew right at the beginning of the class. Alright, so if I choose that as the thing I revolve around, then we are almost done with the epoxy shell, I believe, is what this part of the LED anatomy is called. It's a little epoxy shell. I suppose we could even draw the internal components if we really wanted to, huh? We were getting crazy. Now, the thing that we're missing, if we are focused on details, and I know we like to be focused on details, is actually LEDs have a little flat spot in this little in the lip, and the flat spot is tangent to the side of our line here. So all we really have to do in order to add our flat spot in the position where it actually appears on an LED is if we click on the Create menu and choose the Extrude option. And as the profile I'm going to extrude, it's just going to be that little guy right there. And I'm going to choose to extrude instead of a direction, instead of going just one direction, I'm going to extrude symmetrically, because this sketch kind of exists right in between, right in the middle of our LED here. And if I change my extent type from distance to all, then I'll just extrude out, and I will cut away that little bit of an LED there. And if I turn off my sketch, then there we go. We got our little flat spot. I actually had to double check this, because I was like, really, is there a flat spot on an LED? And the ones that I looked at here at the Makerspace, indeed, they have a little flat spot.
Flat spot means negative.
Wait, you missed that last part.
Oh.
That's your negative cathode.
Flat spot. Sure does. Sure corresponds with that, yeah.
If you think about it, it's like flat, negative.
So what we did is we chose to extrude, and the profile that we chose to extrude is just this little end cap here, just this little tiny little rectangle.
Okay.
And then I went, instead of a direction of one side, I changed my direction to symmetric. And instead of the extent type set to a distance, which is normally set at, I chose to set it to an extent type that was all. And then the operation here is a cut. Cool? All right.
Got all those directions.
Right, yeah. All right, cool. So we've got an LED here. Let's go ahead and draw our anode and our cathode. The little tiny wires. Them little wires that come out the bottom of that their LED. In order to do that, I'm going to draw them on the same sketch that we had been drawing them on. So I'm going to just right-click on the sketch in the feature timeline down here at the bottom of my screen. On a side note, I'm pretty sure that I chose a screen setting that makes my icons smaller. Does that bother you guys? Is it more difficult to see all my icons got a lot smaller? Have you guys noticed that? Or is it just me? Would it be better if the icons were bigger for next class? Okay, right now. All right, so I'm going to right click on the sketch in my feature timeline and say edit sketch. Or I could right click on the sketch in my sketches folder in my LED component and choose to edit the sketch that way. All right, so I am going to draw a rectangle that is a 2-point rectangle. Now, something I want to be conscious of here is that there is a midpoint on this line, and I don't want my rectangle to be on the midpoint there. So I'm going to purposefully make sure that it is not on that midpoint. The reason being, I'm going to draw a rectangle that comes up here, and we're going to define this distance later. And if we accidentally draw our rectangle on the midpoint of the line, it won't let us define that distance later because it'll be over constrained because it already has a fixed distance there as being the midpoint. So I'm going to draw my rectangle purposefully not on that midpoint. And our rectangle is going to be 27 millimeters by 0.6 millimeters. Look out!
Sorry.
Ow!
I didn't drop it on anything.
All right, and then I'm going to hit enter. So now we've got this really long line here. And I am going to now define that distance. So if I zoom in here, the distance that I want to define, I'm going to add by choosing from my create menu the sketch dimension option. So the sketch dimension option is a way for you to add a dimension between two existing objects, let's say, a line or a point. So we can add a sketch dimension between two things, and the two things that I want to add a sketch dimension between are, I want my sketch dimension between this line and this line. So if I click on one first and then click on the other second, and now my third click is going to place this dimension. Whatever this number is for you, it'll be different for you than it is for me. But right now, that measurement is 0.92149023441 millimeters, which is exactly what it needs to be. Now, so what it really wants to be is 2.54 divided by 2. But that would be to the center of that rectangle. And the center of that rectangle is 0.3 millimeters. Let's just go ahead and do the math. Let Fusion do the math for us. So if I say it's 2.54, the middle of the anode and cathode, the distance between the middle of the anode and the middle of the cathode is 2.54 millimeters. So we're going to divide that in half because we only have half of it right now. And then we're measuring to here, not to here, so that's why I'm subtracting 0.3. Should I be adding 0.3 millimeters? No, subtracting 0.3 millimeters because we're only measuring it right here. And our rectangle is 0.6 millimeters, so that's 0.3.
You want to add it because
Yeah. Yeah, let's go with that. No, that doesn't look right. I think I did want to subtract it.
How do you go back to edit that?
Oop.
I typed it wrong.
Yeah, if you typed it wrong, you just got to double click on it. and it will bring it back up. It may do some, add some extra bits in here, so it's multiplying that by 1 millimeter, so that we have an actual physical measurement as opposed to just random numbers. But essentially it's the same. And I do think we want to subtract. Pretty sure. Well, maybe not. I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again.
50-50 chance.
Actually, you're right. You're right. Adding looks better. That looks more correct.
It's 1.57 for the outside leg.
Yeah, correct. That is probably rounding, though. But that'll be close enough for. We're not actually going to manufacture these LEDs, so they don't have to be that accurate. All right, so the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to draw the other side of our LED here. So I'm going to grab my line tool, my trusty line tool, and I'm going to draw a line from the inside line of our, oops, what's up?
Mine is 0.97.
All right, let me take a look.
Did I click something wrong?
15.4, divided by 2. Parentheses. I think we determined that it was plus, not minus. Yeah. So then there we go. Cool.
That's fine.
Yeah. All right. So now, actually, instead of doing that, can we mirror just a point? I never tried mirroring just a point. Look at that. You can mirror just a point. That's real handy. All right. Cool. So, so I'd like to place another rectangle over on the other side here, but I don't have any lines or geometry or anything to base that on. But I can mirror over some geometry. So if I grab from my Create menu the mirror option, and I come in and just choose as the object that I want to mirror this inside corner point. And I choose as the mirror line that same center line that we chose to revolve our little epoxy cap around. Then I just get a little point that exists at just the right spot. And from that point that exists at just the right spot, we can draw our last rectangle that we need to draw here. Actually, that's not true. Our last rectangle that we need to draw for our LED. And that rectangle is going to be, it's 27 millimeters plus 1.5 millimeters.
28.5.
Yeah, so it's 28.5 millimeters. That is also another way to, and it is the same thickness. It is 0.6 millimeters. I was kind of surprised at the way that it called out the dimensions on the drawing I found. It's 1.5 millimeters longer, plus or minus a whole millimeter. That's a huge tolerance for something that's only 1.5 millimeters long. So I don't know if these LEDs can really vary that much from manufacturer to manufacturer, or just this company, LED Supply. Maybe they, I don't know. It just seems like a huge tolerance for something like that. Anyway, all right, I'm done. I'll get off my soapbox now. And now I'm just going to go ahead and say finish sketch. Now that I've stepped down from my soapbox, I can complete a sketch now that I'm at ground level with everybody, with all of you fine people. All right, so now let's go ahead and grab from our create menu. Let's go ahead and choose to extrude. The items that we are going to, of course, extrude are our anode and our cathode. We are going to extrude those symmetrically as well, because they kind of exist right in the middle of our LED. So we want to go an equal amount in each direction from our sketch. So we're going to go out symmetrically. I don't actually know that this is a square, but I'm choosing to make it that way. So this is also going to be 0.6 millimeters. That wasn't called out in the drawing that I found.
You want to go 0.3 because you're going symmetrically half of the distance?
You certainly could. So this feature was added some point during the summertime here. So this is a new little option, and what this does is it says, hey, the distance that you're specifying here when you're doing symmetric, is it half the distance or is it the full distance? So you can do half. You can say, hey, this is 0.3, or you can say, hey, it's 0.6, and then tell it you're specifying, I believe they call it whole length. Yeah, whole length.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good. What's up?
Because I tend to miss this part. The operation, is that?
The operation is going to be a new body. I mean, I suppose you could join these together, but I like to add appearances to my bodies so they look different. So if it's a different thing, physical thing here, I make it a different physical thing in my drawing, but that's pretty nitpicky. So, all right, and I'm going to say okay. So now I'm going to turn off or hide my sketch. I've got some bodies that I can name here. This first body 1, this is our LED cap. Body 2 for me, this is the short one is the anode. Nope, the short one is the cathode. I'm going to call it the anode. And then the long one I'm going to call my cathode. You can swear at me in the YouTube comments if I got those backwards.
Short one is the cathode.
Short one is the cathode. Alright, I did do it backwards. Probably misspelled it too, but that's okay. All right, cool. So now let's go ahead and add some appearances here. So from our modify menu, let's go ahead and choose an appearance. And if you find your miscellaneous folder, in that miscellaneous folder, you will find an emissive folder. And in that emissive folder, near about halfway through, there is red LED. And we could just take this red LED appearance and I can drag and drop it on top of my body here in the drawing view, or I can drag and drop it on top of my body in my bodies folder. As kind of a side note, you can also drag and drop on top of a component. If you drag and drop on top of a component, it will make all the bodies inside of that component whatever appearance that is. And any new bodies that you make, if you make a new body, after you do this, it will automatically apply that appearance to any new bodies that you make if you've applied this appearance to a specific component. All right, so that's good enough for me here. I just wanted to.
Where?
So
in the library.
Yeah, in miscellaneous, and then emissive.
Ah, okay.
There are actually two emissive folders. There's also an emissive folder inside of other, but I don't know why there are two emissive folders. It doesn't make any sense to me. This one just has like LED screens, displays in it, so you can have a picture glow. But
I think the difference is that those other ones are SDs.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Versus
But you know
like,
they have displays here too, so they could easily put those in this folder too. It's kind of like, why is there two emissive folders? Anyway, so all right, cool.
Just two different folders for LCD. Okay.
So now that we've got an appearance here, I kind of wanted to show you something new that I've been doing here. So I think I have to save before it'll let me actually do this. So let's go ahead and save. This is a traffic light. I'm going to label this from class because I already have like a prep for class version of this folder. So traffic light. Now we're going to want to have 3 of these, and kind of my go-to method for making more than one of something has been to use the rectangular pattern option. But let me show you why this is not a good option here. So you don't have to do this. I'm going to go ahead and do this and show you why this doesn't work very well. The object is this component. The axis is this one right here, and I'm just going to drag it up. Look, there are 3 stoplights, but they're all red, and I don't want them all to be red. I want, that one of them to be green. Oh wait, as soon as I change one of them to green, they all change to green, and it's because when you make a pattern, it does something where it kind of links them together in some way, shape, or form. So if I change something about any one of these components, it made 3 different components. Each one of those different components has a sketch in it. And if I go in and change something about this sketch, it will change something about all the other sketches, and then therefore all the other components. So, which is kind of annoying sometimes. So what my go-to method here has been now is when I know I want to make one thing and I just want to make a slight tweak to other objects that are identical to it, is I do something that I told people not to do when I first started using Fusion 360, is I'm going to copy. I'm going to right-click on the red LED component, and I'm going to choose the copy option. And now I'm going to right-click on my main document component, and I'm not going to choose paste. I'm going to choose paste new. So paste actually does the same thing as a pattern does. It links them together. But if you choose to paste new, then it will make a new component. It will make a duplicate of that component that I can then just kind of move upwards, however much I need to move it upwards or downwards. And I can say OK. And now this component is not tied to the component that it came from. It is a new version of it. So I can indeed change the appearance of one thing in this thing. Or I could change a sketch in this component and tweak it in a little bit. Maybe this is one of the LEDs that's 1 millimeter longer on the anode, so I can make that modification if I wanted to. So that's the pro tip for the night. The last thing we want to do here is we want to create kind of an enclosure for our LEDs.
I thought when I went to do it, I accidentally put a word instead of up, and so now mine is like creating somewhere, and I want it to align.
I would just may say cancel, and then just try again. Or you got it if there's already another component right there, so you can just say modify and then move. And then you can choose pick the component. So right now you've got object type of bodies that you're moving, so you can change that to components. And then you can choose that component, whichever one, because they kind of exist right on top of each other. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Cool. I just moved it up a little bit. We'll want to move it into place after we do the next step. So. All right, so now let's see if we can draw an enclosure before the end of class here. So from my create menu, so I have made sure that my main document component is my active component here. Because I'm going to make another new component. And if I make another new component while one of my red LED components is the active component, it'll make a component inside of that component. And I don't want to nest it inside of another component. I want to make a new component in my main document component here. So I just click on that little radio button next to my main document component. And now I can click on create and then new component. And I can call this the traffic housing or the traffic box. That's what they call it downtown. The old traffic box. Put a little candlelight in there, and then that's how you know when to stop your car. All right. Crickets. Cool. No, you're good.
I'm making a confused face because mine is. It's weird.
It's weird?
Music's like it's now, but earlier when I moved it up, it didn't like have that same. Now it is, but earlier this one was transparent and this one was solid, which was weird. So I click enter.
Yep, there you go. All right. All right, cool. So now let's go ahead and create a sketch. I'm going to create that sketch right on my front plane there. Whenever it gives me this dialog box, I always think the right answer is capture position. Because that means the position that things are in right now is the position that I want them to be in. And revert, I don't know what that would revert to. And that seems like never the right answer. Unless I'm looking at something that is obviously wrong, in which case I would fix it before I do the next step. So the option I think here is always capture position. You get that a lot if you move a lot of things around. If you use the move tool, it'll give you that dialog box a lot. All right, so I'm going to click on my create menu. I'm going to come on down to circle. I'm going to choose to make a center diameter circle here. And I'm going to choose to put that center diameter circle right in the middle of my drawing world for two reasons. One is I like to have something connected to the origin. And two is our LED happens to exist right in the middle of our drawing world. I wonder how that happened. Coincidence. I'm going to make it 10 millimeters. It seems like a fine opening size for a tiny little LED light to me. I am going to make another circle right away And that other circle, I'm just going to make it 1 millimeter bigger than our 10 millimeter circle. So I could make a 12 millimeter circle, which would give me a 1 millimeter thickness on the outside. Or we could choose to use our offset tool. So from our modify menu here, I can grab the offset tool, and I can specify the circle there as the object or sketch curve that I'm going to offset. And 1 millimeter is good. That's a phenomenally easy 3D printable size. 1 millimeter is going to cause a problem?
Well, it's just that the distance, the next one up.
Oh, that'll be fine. We're gonna move them. We're gonna move them later. Yeah, we'll move them later. No stress. All right. So now I'm gonna make one more sketch here. Hold on. Before we finish this, I need to make a couple of lines. So from my create menu, I'll grab my line tool. And I just want to bisect my circles in half horizontally. So a couple ways we could do that. We could draw a line across our circles and like not hit the center point. And I could add a coincident constraint later. I'm bisecting that in half. The other way to do it would just be to grab your line tool and draw out from the center twice. So I draw from the center. That little weird two blue lines with the 3 blue angled bits coming off of it, that's actually a horizontal vertical constraint that it's giving me here. So it's saying, hey, that line is straight horizontal. Hey, that line is straight horizontal. So 2 different options there. Cool. The goal here was, so we've drawn the opening for our light, and then we've also drawn the little shade. So the shield that kind of goes over the top and right and left of the light. Oh, it looks like you have the circle tool.
Third create line, and then there's this.
You're drawing a line. Yeah. You just connect it to the circle there. Just put it right there. There you go. You got a line. I think it was showing you the angle that line could be at. Yeah. All right, cool. So the last thing that we got to do on this here fine sketch is to make a center rectangle. And I'm going to make my center rectangle at the same center point as my circles were there. And I'm just going to draw it. Seems like 15 millimeters wide is about right. And then 40 millimeters tall. Seems like I'll be able to get another circle down here and another circle up here. Cool. There we go. Let me just clean up my measurements a little bit here, just so we can see them if I'm going to want to come back at them later. And then I can go ahead and say finish sketch. Now we can go ahead and we can extrude out our box shape here. So if I come up to my create menu and I choose to extrude. The things that I'm going to extrude here are going to be everything to start off with here. And I'm going to extrude them backwards towards my LEDs. I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to make it 15 millimeters and make it the same depth as it is wide. I've still got my traffic box as my active component. That's still important. So knowing what your active component is important, because as we're creating a body, if we were creating this body and we had a different active component that we don't want to create the body in, it would create that body inside of whatever our active component currently is. Like regardless of where the sketch is that we're extruding this from, it will extrude it into the active component. Alright, so 15 millimeters, I'm going to go ahead and say OK. Something that is very important about traffic light enclosures is they have to be able to hold the lights. And right now this is a solid block, which will not hold lights very effectively. Thankfully, Fusion gives us a wonderful tool in the Modify menu called Shell. There are two separate and unique ways to use the Shell tool. One would be to specify a face of our object here. That face would be the opening of our shell. So it'd be kind of like the top of our box. The other way to use the Shell tool is, instead of clicking on something in my drawing component, my drawing view here, if I find the body in the bodies folder that it lives in, and I click on it there, then it will allow me to create a shell, but it will allow me to create a shell that doesn't have an open face. So if I make this a 1 millimeter shell, that'd probably be sufficient. You can't tell it's hollow, but you'll be able to tell that it's hollow in the next step that we do. So now, I'm going to go ahead and say OK. What's that? Oh, did I lose you? So we're making
I
a...
didn't see what you clicked on.
So we went to Modify and then Shell, and then I just clicked. So if you spin down the folder there, your traffic box folder, and then spin down the bodies folder there, and then I clicked on the body there, and then I gave it a 1 millimeter size. And then you can say OK. So now we can extrude our opening for our light. When we're going to do a cut here, and something that is different about cuts than about other operations here is, when I'm cutting, even though I'm cutting in my traffic box component, it will also cut away any other bodies in other components that it also sees visible here. So what you can do to avoid that is, there's an objects to cut little spin down window here, and if I turn off the little checkbox by where my red LED is, then it won't cut that body. You can see that it kind of reappears there as not being flat anymore. Because we only want to cut away from our traffic box body 1 component there. Now, let's go ahead and extrude again. We'll extrude outward our little face shield, or our little shield here. I'm coming out negative 5 millimeters, but it could be 5 millimeters for you, depending on how negative and positive work on here. Those are always different. I am going to choose join, Join is a fine operation here. And I'm going to say okay. Now I know what you're thinking. Dude, this traffic light only has one opening. What's up with that? And here's what's up with that. So I have been erring on the side of choosing to do things in ways. There's more than one way to skin a cat, as my favorite coworker tells me on a regular basis. So down here, there's more than one way to do things in Fusion. I could choose to make a pattern with a sketch. I can also choose to make a pattern out here in the 3D world. And when I choose to make a pattern out here in the 3D world, then I get easy options to change that pattern later. I get little icons down here in my feature timeline. So I've been erring on the side of making my patterns out here in the real world, in 3D world when I can. So I can choose to make now a rectangular pattern. Instead of making a rectangular pattern of a body, in this case though, I can choose to make a rectangular pattern of a feature. This is kind of meta, I guess, because the reason I'm choosing to do it this way is so I can have a feature out here in my feature timeline. But I'm using features to make my feature, so it's a little trippy. The features, the objects that I'm going to use are the last two extrudes that I just did. So a feature is one of these things down here in my timeline, and if I pick both of those, I can choose an axis for my rectangular pattern. So I can just choose any vertical line. And I'm just going to drag my my object down here. Now you'll notice that my pattern is actually in the middle. It's a centered pattern, and there is an option for that. So instead of doing a one direction kind of pattern, if we change that to symmetric, then it makes our pattern equally in both directions. 3 is the default, and 3 is exactly what we want. I don't actually... Sorry, what's that?
Millimeters?
12 millimeters is what I went with. I don't actually know the specific changes that this last option, this compute type, gives. I don't see much of a difference most of the time in how it does it. So if any of you have insight there, feel free to share them. And I'm just going to say okay, and there we go. We got ourselves a traffic light. For 3D printability, it might be beneficial to add like some fillets. If you wanted to, what we should have done is, if we were going to add fillets, we should have done it before we made the pattern. But we could add a little fillet underneath these guys, like here and here. This might make it a little bit more 3D printable if we don't have like big overhangs. You could print it the right side up instead of having to print it upside down and maybe have some support material waste. You might be able to print this, get away with printing this without support material. I suppose I could add a fillet here and here as well. Maybe that makes it look a little bit more traffic light-esque. And then it does not carry that over in that rectangular pattern that I made there, so I just have to come back and add in those extra features. And there we go. Obviously, you'll need a hole at the bottom of this for to run wires up and for it to stand on something. But that's a good start on traffic light project for the electronics class. And that brings us to the conclusion of tonight. We're only 3 minutes late. Any requests for next week? Next week, advanced class. So if you see me around here at the space, or if you want to leave a comment on the YouTube channel, you can totally do that. I read all the comments because I've only gotten like 2 of them, so it's really easy to read them all. But yeah, I've been having fun with joints, with assemblies. So maybe I'll bring that in tomorrow if I can manage to make it to a Tuesday meeting for a change. But I made a little strand beast thing, so I've been having fun with joints. All right, we'll see you next week.
Very good, sir. Thank you.